Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another key conversation on mental health. As you are all aware by now, we've done a number of these conversations throughout the month of May, May being Mental Health Awareness Month. And today we have a really special guest, Natasha Bowman, who's joining us. We're super excited to have this conversation. And Natasha, it's so fabulous to have you on with us and to kind of learn about your story, which I think is really quite impactful and powerful. So
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
yeah. So for those who are kind of new to these conversations, we've been hosting a number of conversations on different aspects of mental health throughout the month of May. We've got really two more left before May ends. And then we'll find out how we want to continue these conversations moving forward past May. But if you are in an organization, an HR director, or an executive, or just a manager, whoever, like today's conversation, I think will really resonate well with you. We're going to talk about how mental health can be, approached, discussed within an organization, how to kind of train your managers so they can have this conversation. It's really important to understand that a lot of people, especially through the pandemic, are struggling and probably need to have the conversation or need to talk to somebody about it. And it's likely your managers might be the people that they go to. And we want to make sure that they're prepared for that. But before we get too deep into today's conversation, let's first learn a little bit about you, Natasha. So I don't know if you've watched some of these previous ones. I've got a couple, icebreakers just to understand you and how you address your mental health in certain ways.
Okay.
And then we'll get into, the core of today's topic.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I'll ask these icebreakers and I'll give you a chance to just, give us a little bit more detail about yourself. You are, let me see. All right, I'm going to go down the list here. Okay, so you are in New York, is that right?
I am.
But grew up in the South, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I grew up in LA, Lower
Oh,
Alabama.
yeah. Okay, we're both. Yeah. Okay, so this might be a pretty easy question for you. Are you more of a mountains person or more of a beach person?
Oh, wow. Mountain, definitely beach. Grew up in the
Definitely
South.
beach. Okay.
My husband's from Lake Michigan, so definitely beach. Yes.
Excellent. All right. That's great. We're gonna get you out to the mountains though.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to get you out here.
Yes.
All right. When you are trying to like block out the world and focus, what's the music you listen to?
You don't want to know.
No, I do. That's why I asked.
You got me on that one.
Okay.
I like rap, like gangster
Okay.
rap. So,
I like it. Loud, real loud.
loud, but to be honest, to block out, I know how some people study and do all these good things and listen to music. I actually don't. I actually have to have silence, believe it or not.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, yes.
Very, very good. Okay, so like when you're like on the move, it's
Yes.
rap, and then when you're
Yeah.
actually focused,
Up. Yeah, then
all right,
it's
writing your book, you're doing it in silence.
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
excellent. All right, so the last question I want to end with is a bit of a hit or miss kind of question. But do you have like a good luck charm or a superstition before you do anything crazy?
Oh, no, I just manifest things. I
Okay,
envision myself in the places, I envision
all
myself
right.
doing things. So here's my key. Whatever my goal is at that moment, I make it my password. And
Okay,
honestly, I've been doing it for about 10, 15 years now. And honestly, it works. I literally make it my password. If I want to lose 15 pounds, just for example, that's part of my password.
that's part of your password.
It's a
Like,
professional
like
code. It's part of my passcode. So,
I like
password.
it.
Yeah.
That's a great trick to put your goal as your passcode. So
Yeah.
like
Because you're
unlocking your
typing
email,
all day
whatever.
long. Yep. In some way, it's, typed all
Yeah,
day long, all day long. So you manifest it that way.
I love that idea. Okay, that is great. This question. I get such interesting answers. Like nobody carries a rabbit's foot around with them, but everybody has like just something
Yeah.
that helps them like focus on what they're doing. I love it. All right,
Mhm.
password. I'm gonna reset all my passwords today now.
There you
So
go. Whatever your goal is, make it your password. It's gonna happen.
okay. All right, tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do we need to know about you before we start today's conversation?
Yeah. So I am a labor and employment law attorney by trade, but decided early in my career I didn't want to be on the dark side of misconduct. So I want to be more proactive and intentional in creating engaging workplaces. So I went on over to the HR side and stayed there for the majority of my career before founding my firm, Performance Renew. I'm a published author of 2 books now, writing my third one. I'm a professor at a couple of universities, have a wonderful husband named Kent, and 2 kids, Campbell 22, Shannon 14.
All right, I like it. So busy person,
Yes.
but quite an incredible story, which I think we're going to get into here.
Mhm.
However, just before we get started, I do think it's important we put out this disclaimer. We will be talking about suicide today,
Mhm.
which is part of your story. And so, those that might be sensitive to the topic or whatnot, we just want to let you know that that will be talked about in today's program.
Mhm.
Um, but with that, so let's start with your story. So you obviously have been on the HR side for a long time, an attorney. You've got an incredible career and a lot of accolades that go along with that career. Uh, in the last couple of years, it feels like you've done, I don't want to say like a 180, but your whole focus has shifted into mental health. And
Yes,
there's a key pivot to why that is the case.
it
So
is.
do you want to talk about like what that pivot was and
Abs-
what has caused it?
Absolutely. So back in 2020, this time, I never expected mental health to be the focus of my career. But 2 years ago, we were shut down and we were in quarantine. And like you said, prior to that, if we look back at early March of 2020, I was sitting on top of the world. I mean, all of those past code goals that I put in, they had come to fruition. I had, conducted a TED talk, had written my first book. I
Right,
was named top 30 global guru. I was headed to Indonesia to get that, award. I was planning a big conference. I'm just thinking, nothing could go wrong. And then this disease that was, countries away found its way here and everything shut down. So
right,
all of my events were canceled, all of my clients, put their projects on hold, and my life was on hold. And what I did not know, sitting here, doing nothing, was that my brain had not been trained to abstain from doing things. And so
right,
it start going haywire. Start doing things it had never done before. Start thinking thoughts it had never thought before. And it was, my according to my husband, my speech started to really speed up where he could barely understand me. I was, going back and forth between very happy, then very sad and teary. It was just very, very strange and unique for me. And, one day my husband turned to me and said, I think there's something wrong with you. It feels like it's, chemical. And so, I said, okay. So I started to see a therapist virtually. And during that time, I wasn't diagnosed with anything, and she couldn't find anything. She was like, "Oh, I see this highly functioning person." She couldn't
right.
figure
Yeah.
it out. And during that time, and it is actually exactly 2 years ago today, the murder of George Floyd happened. And through that unfortunate event, many organizations decided to address, historic systemic racism that were happening in
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
workplace. So my company started to pick up. And in fact, I had more clients than I ever had before. And so I'm thinking, okay, I should be going back to normal life now. Life feels good again. I'm back to doing what I do.
Starting to do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but for some reason it didn't. And so then I started to shift from that kind of high to very, very low and just kept going deeper and deeper into this hole throughout the rest of that year and still undiagnosed. And, I'm talking to this therapist who still couldn't figure out what was happening. But
Hmm.
in January of 2021, I decided I no longer wanted to be here. And I attempted suicide. And I found myself in a involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric institute. And it was when I was admitted there that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And once I was able to do some research on that, uh,
Yeah.
it kind of explained a lot of things. Like, oh, that's why I could work days at a time. I didn't need sleep. I could work multiple jobs at a time. At one point, I was teaching at three universities across three cities and two states. One required me to miss a whole night of sleep, traveling back and forth to. And I had no problem with that. In fact, I thought everybody else was lazy because they went to bed. And I was just, just this ambitious
Right.
person. But that explained that. It also explained those days when I couldn't get out of bed. And I would say, oh, I'm just burned out. I've been working so much. But that was depression. And
Yeah.
so of course, hearing that you have a mental illness, I started to, go into this place of blame, shame, and pain.
Hmm.
And, it was really hard to reconcile that and to accept it because all the images that I saw as it related to mental illness were, people who were engaging in destructive behavior, dangerous
Right.
behavior. They weren't really able to function. I even thought, when I was admitted into the psychiatric institute, okay, where are the girls from Girl Interrupted? Like, I'm thinking it's
Right. Right.
that type of experience. That's the only thing that I knew. And so, I still remained in this state where I was very reclusive. I didn't post on my social media platforms for several months. I thought everybody that saw me knew, I was very paranoid, and very rarely
Yeah.
left the house. And
And
then
they
I
look
just
at you differently now, right?
exactly, because I looked at myself differently, so
Sure.
why wouldn't they, I thought. So I did a lot of research. My husband did a lot of research, and we found out that I'm not alone. 1 in 5 Americans suffer from some sort of mental illness.
Right.
So that was helpful. But what also was helpful was that I discovered so many people that I admired, so many people who were able to make such a significant positive difference in society, suffer
Yeah.
from mental illness, from Winston Churchill to Mariah Carey, right? And so, I'm like, oh wow, I've read about these people, or I know these people, and they're fine, they're functioning, people love them, and
Yeah.
so that helped me to come out of that place that I was in, that place of pain, blame, and shame, and that began a
Okay.
bit of my career.
So, um, so when I first heard you and I had dinner a couple weeks ago, I guess
Mhm.
maybe a month ago now,
Yeah.
and when I first heard you talking about this, I was really blown away that you could get such a diagnosis at such a later stage in life, right?
Yeah.
Uh, like you didn't know growing up that this was something that you were dealing with, and
No.
yet also, the way bipolar works, like you're in this manic state for such a long,
Mhm,
extended period of
mhm,
time,
mhm.
and probably didn't even understand what a depressive state might actually look like until your whole world changed.
That's right. I've functioned pretty much all of my life in a state of mania. And again, with many people, that state of mania means that they do engage in, destructive behavior, very
Yeah,
reckless, et cetera, et cetera. But I was at a lower state of mania. So that brain racing, thinking you can do anything, that, delusions of grandeur was
sure.
actually feeding my professional goals because I'm like, oh, I can become the president of the
You
United States if I
you can
want
do
to.
anything you want to do.
I
Yeah,
can do anything I want to do. And that was what was feeding that, and but as I looked back on my life, although I wasn't diagnosed, I'm, over 40 years old, when I
right.
looked back at certain time periods of my life, a lot of things started to make sense.
Mm,
And I think back to even in my early 20s when I was struggling in college because I was very, very popular in high school, had a whole lot of friends. I was kind of miss everything. Then I went to
yeah,
college. I was kind of a nobody on campus. You went to college with a whole bunch of people. People don't know you. And all of my friends were different places. And I was kind of a nobody. And so I kind of left school and just kind of jumped in my car, riding around, sleeping in my car, just not my ambitious self. And I remember after one of my just kind of disappearances, coming home, and my parents were sitting in the kitchen, and my dad was like, "Are you on drugs?" And I was like, "No." And they were both like, "Okay, okay, fine." So my mom cooked dinner, and we never talked about it again. Like, it was never a
Right.
conversation about how did you go from this to that, you know? And so, if we think about it, a lot of times, especially in Black families, we don't really have conversations about mental health,
Yeah.
So I'm sure they prayed about
Okay.
it and thought that it would work out, and it looked like it did. So they just kept praying, and that was it. But when I looked back, it really did make sense.
It started to make sense. It
Yeah.
reminds me of there's a comedian on Netflix right now. Her name is Hannah Gatsby, I believe. I don't know if you've seen this, but
Heaven.
she actually was diagnosed with autism like super later in life. And she talks about this in her
Oh,
bit about like once that diagnosis comes, like the world made sense in a way that it had never made sense
mhm,
to her
mhm,
before. Like
mhm.
her mannerisms made sense to her and she could explain it. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, like maybe found herself more related to, like she was able to relate to herself in a way that she
Mhm,
was
mhm.
unable to before. It feels
Yeah,
like your experience was very similar in that regard.
absolutely. Just everything made sense. And it's so funny because I have such a sense of peace now, if you will.
Yeah.
And because I'm like, oh, I should not be up at 1 o'clock in the morning pecking at my laptop. My husband thought I thought that was cute. He would even
Right.
say, "Oh, do you need snacks? Do you need to?" We just thought, "Oh, that's me." And so
Sure.
now, we're both we both monitor that. Like, he's like, "Okay, shut it down. Take your
Yeah.
medication, level out your mood. Those types of things to make sure that I don't go too far this way or too far that way." I'm gonna lie. I do love a little bit of, Manny, because it helps me with my spirit. I'm not gonna lie. I keep just a little bit of it, but I take
Hold
mood.
on to it. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on just a little bit because it's me, right? Because I kind of felt
Sure.
like at the
Well,
beginning,
and that's been you for so long, a part of your life,
yeah,
that state, right?
exactly. And at the beginning, with the first medications they gave me, it really mellowed me out. And I had to tell my psychiatrist, like, I can't do this. Like, I feel like I'm not
Hmm.
myself. I'm a whole different person. And so,
Right.
we worked together for several months to find that right, number, if you will. And so therefore I feel myself, I feel my same self, but I don't overdo it. I go to bed at a certain time. I'm on a schedule, and it's a relieving thing because I thought that because of the mania, I set such a high expectation for myself that I
Hmm.
thought I always had to be working at this level. And even when my brain wasn't there, I felt like I had to be there, right? And so
Right.
I was overextending myself to be in that place, right? So with that being said, if I'm not there, I'm not that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having a Netflix and chill day, which or not working 7 days a week, not working multiple jobs at a time. I'm okay with that. Before, I was not okay with that. I had to be seen in every place, every time, working on multiple
Okay.
roles at a time. I'm okay with, like, you know what? Today is not the day. I'm not chasing anything today. I'm
Yeah.
today. And that was
So
acceptable before.
So a couple of things I wanted to just touch on. You mentioned this briefly, but you had like major misconceptions of what it meant to have a mental illness,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Like you talked about, like when you were in your psychiatric treatment facility, that
mhm,
you were expecting like crazy people. I don't
mhm.
mean to use that word liberally, but like just really people who were like self-destructive in bad situations, who put
Yeah,
themselves, they deserved maybe to be
exactly.
there. You had a misconception of what that was, and which probably was hard for you to put
Mhm,
yourself in the same position as what these perceived people were, but also as you understood what those misconceptions, they were actual misconceptions,
mhm,
not
mhm.
real, it's not the reality of a majority of people who suffer from mental illness. uh, but talk about how that's kind of started to shape how you talk about mental illness, because you are actually very open on your LinkedIn and your social profiles. Like, I think it was just 2 days ago you might have posted like it wasn't a good day today. Like today
Yeah,
sucked,
yeah, to
right?
just
And you
tough,
talk about this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're exactly right, because I had that misconception, because I thought, first of all, being the mental health institute, I pictured white walls and I would be strapped down to something going, Completely not the case. You know,
Yeah.
it's a very actually relaxing environment. You don't have a phone. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cute. Like, I'm just kind of sitting here with my thoughts. I've never done that before. And they give you an iPad during the day. So I just watch what, so,
Hmm.
everybody that was there was like working professionals and, who just were experiencing things on my floor. And then I, thought about, and that's the reason why I wanted to go public. When I first went public, I posted my professional profile pic and said, this is the face of bipolar disorder, so that people could see those images that we've been taught to believe when it comes to mental
Right.
illness. That may be part of the story. I'm not, saying that's not part of it, but that's not the only story of mental illness. And so
Right.
I want to live boldly in my mental illness in a very public way to show, yes, I can be overall highly functioning, my same self. I talk about my treatment. One time I posted my pills, like these are all the pills that I have taken. And it's like tons of them till we got to the right one. I talk about, what, today is not good. I can't get out of bed today. I talk about, I posted just yesterday, hey, guess what? I can't get a TSA pre-check pass because I have been involuntarily committed to a psychiatric institute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so those are the things. And when we think about the stigmatization, I'm like, oh, so the government saying I gotta keep my shoe, I gotta take my shoes off because it's those
Sure.
types of things in society and my lived experience that I want to bring to the forefront, right? Because a lot of people were shocked by that. Like, what? Yep, that's just part of it. And that's something
Right.
that I don't understand, like, what's the difference, but that's part of it. So I want to live very openly, very transparent, so that I can change that perception. If people, and especially managers, right? Because that's where I really want people to understand, because I'm a workplace person. And
Yeah.
so, people, organizational leaders, when people share, hey, I'm, have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, their bias doesn't go to this place of, oh, you're going to be destructive, you're going to be dangerous, you're not going to be functioning. But perhaps they'll think of me and they'll think, oh, I know someone with a mental health disorder and she's doing just fine. And I'm sure you will too.
Yeah. I love it. I think that is really inspirational in its own way, but like that's the whole purpose of what these conversations have been. And what I think managers really struggle with the most. I was doing a training on manager training, like how to train managers to have a conversation on mental health a month ago, right?
Mhm,
And I had somebody come after me and afterwards come talk to me, and
mhm,
she's like, hey, look, I love what you talked about, but the problem people have is retaliation. Like they don't want to come out because they're going to deny themselves
mhm,
the
mhm,
opportunity to have promotions, or people are not going to want to give them more
mhm.
or give them the opportunity to even take on more responsibility, because
Yeah,
they don't want to put them in a position, like it could be out of
yes, they
empathy or
don't.
sympathy. They don't want to put them in a position that's going to
Yes,
overly stress them out because they don't know how they're going to
absolutely.
handle it.
And
um
that's true. Mhm.
yeah.
That's a real I mean, that's a real perception right now. I'm not gonna be a fraud and lie and say, "Hey,
Right.
you share with your manager that everything's gonna be okay," because the current state of mental health is that it's not. I conducted a survey a few months ago and asked that question, "Are you diagnosed with a mental health condition? Have you shared it with your employer? If you did, what was your experience?"
Yeah.
And the overwhelming majority was that they were retaliated against in some way. And those ways were, the subtle ways that you just discussed, where it was, oh, I was given less responsibility, I wasn't given a lot of visibility, or I was terminated eventually.
Yeah.
People, they nitpicked me all the way out. So that's why it's so important that you're doing the work that you do about how to have those conversations, and that we also have the conversations with managers, to talk about, what
Yeah.
people can do with the mental health disorder, instead of thinking that negative way, because we always go to, well, that means you can't do this.
Yeah. And I think that's I mean, a lot of the retaliation comes out of a place of care in a lot of cases, right? Like they're just like, oh, we don't want to put you in a position that's going to
Exactly.
stress you out or put you in a situation you don't want to necessarily be in. You're capable. We
Yep.
know that. That's why you're in the job that you're in. But
We don't
we're
want to
looking
put
out
you
for you. And in the
exactly.
end, like that turns out to progress in the wrong way for some
Exactly.
individuals,
For the
unfortunately.
person that's experiencing that, it's not helping them. You're not doing them a favor. I
Hmm.
understand the intent, but what you're doing is telling them they're receiving that as, oh, I'm not enough. Is something wrong with me?
Right.
And then if we start to receive that, we start to accept that, right? And then therefore we may find ourselves in the place where we're not as functioning as what we used to be, because now we're being told by society, our managers, and all, our family, and whatever, that we're not. And you can't help but to, not accept that at some point. So that's why it's so important that as a person that suffers, that you, again, you understand that your capabilities with the right treatment plans. And I have to emphasize that you can't do this on your own. If you have a treatment
Right.
plan, follow it. Even when you think you feel good, that's why you're feeling good, because you're on the treatment plan. So don't stop that. And
Sure.
and that your support system, right, is there to also to boost your confidence and to let you know that you're fully capable.
Yeah, and we haven't talked so much about the support system, but you are in a lucky enough position to have a great husband. I met him at dinner as well.
Mhm.
Super
Yes,
supportive of what you're doing.
yes.
I mean, it was great to talk to him and kind of understand what his position was
Mhm.
as you were experiencing, your depressive episode that ultimately like caused you to try to kill yourself. And
Yes.
and it put a lot of pressure on him. And it's funny because you mentioned this earlier, but he noticed the changes in you
He
long
did.
before you ever noticed,
Oh, yes.
right?
And I was resistant to it. Like, how dare you assert
Right.
that there's something wrong with me? I was very resistant for a long time. And then finally, I just kind of acquiesced. Okay, I'm tired of hearing about it. Let me go talk to a therapist. And I probably was skewing, right, when I was saying she couldn't really diagnose me. I was probably skewing that because I'm like, I'm fine. I'm great. I don't have childhood trauma. I don't have this. I don't have that. It's just,
Sure.
midlife crisis. I'm 40 something, right? Everybody gets to change.
Yeah.
And, you kind of think that. And but it's that's why it's so important that we're honest with ourselves and we face what we're dealing with, and say, hey, I'm not okay. I am thinking things that I traditionally don't think.
Right.
Is going places it typically doesn't go. And the more honest we are with ourselves, the better we can help ourselves. If you're waking up every morning, you got shoulder pain, I mean, it's just bad. Every time you wake up, you're not going to sit there and talk yourself out of that pain, right? You're going to
Yeah.
say, this hurt. I'm not going to cuss, but this hurts. I got to go. This has been happening for 2 weeks now. I got to go see a doctor, right? You're going to do that. So we got to think about that way as we would our brain.
Um, yeah, I love it. So, in the role of managers, managers will get drawn into being part of the support system,
Mhm.
whether they want to or not. Like, if,
Mhm.
if you have a good relationship with your employees, oftentimes a manager is likely to get put into this role of a support
Absolutely.
system. What advice would you give these managers who are kind of getting pulled in, whether they expected to or not, into a support role? Like, what's the when you're looking at somebody to support you, what is it you tell them? What do they need to do? What's their role?
Well, and it's good that you mentioned that, because in the current state as well, and I found this out in a survey, a lot of managers, and I was guilty as HR too, to tell
Hmm.
managers, don't get involved in a conversation with employees about, anything that has to do with their health or disability, because if you know that, it's going to influence your decision making process. So what happens is, if I approach a manager and say, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health, they have been trained for years now to say, oh, cover my ears, go talk to HR, go to EAP, and
Yeah.
remove themselves very quickly from the conversation.
Right.
Right. But as I now have had this lived experience and have learned the lived experience of others, I'm changing my perception about that. Number one,
Okay.
it's an inequitable perception, because that thought process, as I thought about it, only applies to certain conditions, right? So if I came to my manager and said, I've been diagnosed with cancer, and I, as HR, if I heard the manager say, I don't want to talk about that, go to HR, I would go call that manager and say, look, you're not being empathetic. What is wrong with you? I would let them have it, right?
Right.
if an employee approached you and said, hey, I'm pregnant, and they're excited about it, you want to be excited with them as well. You want to celebrate them. When do you do? Let's have a shower. You're going to be all up into that baby situation, right? So what
Sure.
we have done, we have made it inequitable in that some conditions we're saying, oh no, you don't want to hear about that. You just,
Yeah.
send them away. And some conditions we embrace, support, show empathy. But it's because of that stigma. It's because we know that if they hear certain words, that it is going to influence the way that they manage you. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, right, going back to your original question of being that support, it's very important that managers become part of your support system. Number one, you're probably spending more time with your manager than you are anybody else in your
You really
life.
do. Yeah, which makes it natural to get pulled into
Right,
this position.
right. And they need to understand what that support is. It's things that EAP cannot give you, right?
Right.
So if I need sometimes even more, intimate than workplace accommodations. We all know, oh yeah, maybe I need to work from home a couple of days a week, or I need an adjusted schedule to go to the doctor, those types of things. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a different type of support. If we think about even in this virtual environment, it's knowing, hey, if we got a policy to have camera on today, I need to be able to text you and say, today is a camera off day, right? Because I'm struggling
Yeah.
to get out of bed. I can still work, but I just can't get camera ready. And I need for you to be okay with that, right?
Right.
Or, hey, I can't go into a meeting today, this important meeting, because I'm experiencing a level of anxiety or something has happened that's triggering to me. I need for you to know these types of things so that you don't think, have this perception, oh, I'm being lazy, or I'm not engaged, I'm not this, I'm not that. Because what happens is if I don't have that conversation, and it's a couple days a week, I'm not on camera, or if I'm in person and I'm like, not as engaging, or, I asked to back off a meeting at the last minute, all of that, what's going to happen? Eventually, they're going to say you're not doing your job. But and I may be terminated. But to have that conversation, to have that open relationship, to say, hey, this is what's going on. And then we work together to figure out what's the best solution
Yeah.
for the organization. That's so much better than me not saying anything, but yet my manager only, perceives my behavior to change.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking, oh, you've checked out. And so you don't deserve to be here anymore.
Yeah, there's something about that lack of validation, I guess. When somebody's not validated, they are checking out. They
Yep.
are like, maybe it's not worth me putting the time in to do whatever my work
Yep.
is. But when somebody feels validated that, hey, it's okay, you're not feeling okay, or it's okay, you don't have your camera on, whatever, right? Like, it's like, okay, it is okay. And I'm going to continue to do what my job is.
That's
And I think
right.
that has something to do with that.
Mhm.
Not switching gears so much, but let me introduce. So you wrote this book, which has
I
a fascinating story about you writing it. I want to briefly touch on this, but there is a principle that I think is really important as I was reading this about what you call the difference between allyship and ourship.
Yes.
Right. And I feel like this is a really important component to what we're talking about, like in the role of a manager or a support group, or even those that may not necessarily know the situation, but want to be an ally to mental
Uh-huh.
health,
Yeah.
or an ally to really any other, organization against marginalized people.
Uh-huh.
That concept of allyship is really big. A lot of people talking about being an ally.
Uh-huh.
But you say there's a way to take it a step further. And I really loved what you said in here. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what is ourship? Where's
Yeah,
that concept come
absolutely.
from?
Right. So just going back to allyship, many people, especially in the past couple of years, said, I want to be allies to my Black employees, to my LGBTQ
Right.
employees. We're, like you said, that marginalized group. I want to support them. I want to show them I stand with them, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of times people just don't know how to actionalize it, right? And it's more than just, a blackout date on Instagram, where you just put a black box and say, oh, I stand. It's more than just it's words, it's because a lot of times it comes off as performative, right? Because we haven't seen the progress in terms of dismantling inequitable systems that we think we would have seen in this time frame. And
Right.
that's because the concept of allyship has just really been performative. So when we, so that's when I coined the phrase "allyship" to take it a step further in making allyship just a little bit more actionable than allyship. And I think a lot of times when we're an ally only in moments of crisis. If you think about it, even
Mm,
from a political perspective, right? If we think about the United States, we are allies to Ukraine in this moment. They're in a critical moment, right? But before that critical moment, before that invasion of Russia, what were we doing for Ukraine? Nothing.
right.
We thought, oh, there's nothing to do. It's like, oh, they're good. So I'm just gonna wait for that critical moment. So the concept of hourship is when you are constantly proactively engaging in things to make sure that the people that you ally are not suffering or will not suffer in the future, right? You're being very proactive, you're constantly dismantling, and their problem is our problem, right? We're not just waiting on something to happen,
Right.
and we're okay in doing things that don't affect us, right? So I tell the story of Dory Christie, who was a black soldier in World War II. Sorry, not Dory Christie, Dory Miller, who was, he's a black soldier in World War II. During World War II, black soldiers couldn't even fight on the front lines. They were relegated to menial duties and laundry, kitchen, and
Janitorial services, et cetera. Right.
Janitorial, exactly. But when those bombs started dropping on Pearl Harbor, Dory Miller, guess what he did? Found a gun, shot down some planes, got people safely to shore, fully in action. Then we saw during World War II where black soldiers were able to fight on the front lines and in the skies. But guess what? What were they fighting for? While America said they were fighting for democracy, they were not fighting for democracy for black people, because those black soldiers, and they knew it, would still come home to segregation. They would still
Mhm.
come home to lynching and all these other basic rights that they would not have access to. But still knowing that, they still fought, right? Because they saw this is our problem. Although it's not impacting me, I'm not going to benefit from this fight whatsoever. But I'm still fighting it, like it does benefit me. And
Right.
that's the you got to approach mental health and other issues, right? This
Yeah.
may be impacting you at this moment, but if your teammates aren't mentally well, guess what? Your team is not performing at its optimum capability. So
Right.
that's so important that we create cultures of mental wellness. It's a business case and it's a humanity issue.
And I think that's what's really important. You mentioned, I think 1 in 5 is the statistic that have clinical diagnosis of mental
Mhm.
health.
Yep.
50%, if not more, I think are suffering from
Yes.
anxiety and stress, even if it's not clinically diagnosed. And
Absolutely.
the pandemic and all of the changes in the last couple of years has probably exacerbated that. So it's more like we're all in this, and I think mental health goes beyond just the individual who may or may not be suffering, and
Mhm.
that's what it is, and why I like that principle is because it really is our problem collectively.
Mhm.
It's not you who has bipolar, Natasha, right? It's not your problem alone. Like it is a problem that has affected more people, your family being more immediate, but even your career and the people that you support and work with and
Yep.
whatnot. And everybody's taking it on to be part of who and what they're doing. And I think that's so important. And managers should be, I think, ready for
Mhm.
that position because they're going to get thrown into it,
Mhm.
whether they want to or not.
Exactly. Exactly. You hit the
Um,
head.
yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
You gotta say you hit the nail on the head on that.
Thank you. I'm learning here. I've had a couple of these conversations and I'm learning here, which has
Yes.
been great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story with us.
Thank
I mean,
you.
there's so much more we can talk about for
We can go
sure.
over hours.
For
I
hours. When we had dinner last month, we literally went on for hours just
think it
talking.
was at least 2 or 3 hours. Yeah.
We didn't even realize our food wasn't coming out. We weren't even mad at the waiters because we were having such a good conversation.
That's right.
Um, Thank you again. Your book is The Power of One. If you guys can
Yes.
see that,
Yep. And thank you for
I
the link in the
yeah, we put a link in the chat so you guys can download that if you want to. It's been a
yes.
fabulous book. I really love the
Thank
premise
you.
of what you're doing. There's a story behind you writing this book. I guess we'll
It
save for next
is.
time.
Yeah, we'll say
Uh,
that. Yes, we have much more to talk about. So
for sure. Where can we learn more about what you're doing? You've got a couple things that you're working on besides writing another book.
I
Do you
do.
want to
I
share
do.
with us
Yeah,
on
so
what
like
you
we
got?
talked about at the beginning, I pivoted from, my for-profit, which I still have, but my husband and I founded a nonprofit organization called the Bowman Foundation for Workplace Equity and Mental Wellness. And we're using that as our platform to cultivate cultures of mental wellnesses in the workplace and beyond. We're so excited about what we're doing there. So please feel free to visit thebowmanfoundation.org to learn more about that. We're having an inaugural event in October, the Global Impact Awards and Gala. We're going to be recognizing individuals who were using their ordinary actions to influence extraordinary change in their workplaces. So we're so excited to bring those impact makers together, to celebrate them, to hear their stories. A lot of them are similar to mine. These things have happened.
Yeah.
I'm using this as a platform to turn pain into purpose. So I'm so excited to celebrate and hear from them. And you can read about that on the bowmanfoundation.org as well.
Fabulous. Natasha, thank you so much. I recommend everybody go follow Natasha on LinkedIn and the other social platforms. What she posts is great. It's really can be impactful to you and your life. And then also just great material on how to incorporate that into your workday needs, and just kind of get an idea of like what it means to have, you're so open about it, which I absolutely love, just to kind of get a preview of like what it means to have a mental health, issue, I guess, if you want to say that way, a condition. And so the insight, the window into your life, I think has just been fabulous for me. So appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thank you again. Thank you everybody who's taken the time to listen into this conversation today. It's been fabulous. Every single one of these I do is just getting, just been so great for me personally. And so I hope it's been helpful for you and your organization. We're going to continue the conversation on mental health tomorrow. We have Paxton Gray, who's the CEO of 97th Floor, a marketing agency. They have a really fascinating philosophy on taking care of employees and just making the employee culture great, even for being a small business, right? And so a lot of people, I think, feel like taking care of their employees or giving them additional benefits or even benefits like mental health support takes a lot of money and a lot of resources, and small businesses don't feel like they're in a position to do that. We're going to actually talk about why that might be a myth, and how 97th Floor is doing that with Paxton. So please join us tomorrow for that conversation and catch all the recordings of today's conversation and all the previous ones that we've done throughout the month of May on LinkedIn, on Nivati.com, at our blog. You can also catch recaps there. And then we'll be sharing, great snippets throughout the remainder of our time on all these good conversations. Thanks again, Natasha. Thank you again for joining us. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, I look forward to chatting with you more in the future. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.